Welcome. You are listening to Aftersight. This recording is intended solely for individuals who are blind or have low vision.
Thank you for joining us for The Rooster. My name is Dawn. This is being recorded on May 15th, 2024. The content I am about to read is a direct excerpt from the source material and does not represent my personal views or those of Aftersight. The article is titled, "Is Taylor Swift Using Men Like Emotional Toilet Paper to Propel Her Stardom?" In my opinion, it's looking that way. The article is, at the top of the article is a photo of Taylor Swift. Taylor Swift is a blonde woman. In the photo, it's just her face. She has pink lipstick on, blue eyeliner, and mascara. News Briefs, May 14th, 2024, by Anton Sawyer. Look, we've all been in a relationship at some point with a crazy asshole that tore through our lives and made it a complete hell by filling it with codependent love bombing. These kinds of affairs are filled with an intense passion that is carried through its duration, often leading to an explosive ending with shattered hearts everywhere. Thankfully, these courtships with Satan usually burn hot and fast and are over within a few months. With that said, it's important to remember that though these romances don't last long, the flames from that passionate heat can leave a very real path of destruction in its wake. And to be honest, before I fell down the rabbit hole of Taylor Swift's relationships and how they've impacted her art, I held a preconceived notion that she was exactly this kind of crazy a-hole. Between 2006 and the present day, Taylor has had 14 relationships that have inspired, in quotes, at least 20 different songs. Also, it's worth noting that a majority of those relationships lasted about 3 months, with an average of 1 month equaling one song, in terms of creative output. When using these numbers for context, the emotional impact displayed in the lyrics to many of Taylor's songs based on her prior dating experiences takes on much more of a roller coaster ride into Disney hell vibe. Yet, the further I went on with my investigation, the more I would come to find out that I was incredibly off track and there may be something much more nefarious taking place. The main reason I feel my assumption is incorrect comes from the fact that none of her exes talked crap about her. Well, some of them did, but nothing that ever questioned her grip on reality. Mostly, the exes that were upset had been hurt over the fact that the innermost emotional core of their time with Taylor was put on full display for the world to see. But in reality, can they be that upset over her using their love as fodder? I mean, this is what she was trained to do by the fame machine since her first release. Having spent half a decade in the 2010s working in the music business, both as a journalist and as a PR manager, I learned that whenever an artist has success of some kind, anyone who can shape their career, managers, record labels, etc., wants that exact same thing duplicated over and over again. With Taylor's first taste of success coming in the form of a breakup song called Tim McGraw, the die was cast. While a teenager in high school, she was dating an older boy who was a senior. She knew that at the end of the year, he would be leaving and the relationship would come to an end. For a teenager, having a deadline set on how much longer you can love someone hanging over your head would stir up a million different emotions. Taylor was emotionally smart enough to tap into this well and co-write the song Tim McGraw. This track became the lead single off her self-titled debut album and was an immediate hit, reaching the top 10 in the country music charts and eventually going double platinum. This track would also become the blueprint for her musical output over the next 2 decades. I truly believe that Taylor is completely in touch with her emotions and knows how to use them to her advantage. Between the despair she felt while writing Tim McGraw to the intense endorphins that were released when the same song took her career into the stratosphere, she paid attention. And this is where I believe things take a much darker turn. I think she's manipulating these men in order to gain the most intense emotional outcome needed to allow for maximum creative output. When you look through her relationship history, you'll see that between the swiftness of her album releases in conjunction with the relationships that happened prior to that album's completion. It's like she has some internal schedule. It's like she's thinking, quote, well, I have 6 songs written, but the album is due in 9 months. So I'll need to get with at least 2 guys over the next ... end quote. This explains why her relationship with Travis Kelce has lasted so long. She just released an album, so she doesn't need any inspiration right now. But eventually she will, and then he'll be immortalized in some top 10 hit. As a side note, I hope she needs some of that inspiration soon, before September at least. I absolutely detest the Kansas City Chiefs and want Kelce to be met by the wrath brought about by a sea of newly acquired Bronco Swiftie hybrids whose only mission is to cause his demise when he comes to play at Mile High after the breakup. Next article is titled Characters and Creatures by self-taught artist John Paul Gutierrez. The artist combines illustrative, cartoon-style characters and creatures emerging from one another to create a self-contained world of random ideas and voices. Article is headed by one of these illustrations, and it is in black and white with a background that is brown. It is a character that looks to be a man. He has a large mustache. He is wearing a pointy-looking kind of pirate hat. He has a pitchfork in his hand, a rooster coming out of his, what appears to be his shoulder, and a fish at the top of his hat, pointy hat. And he looks to be wearing a kerchief that has sort of flowers on it. Art, May 1st, 2024, by Wendy Jones. When asked how he describes his style of art, John Paul Gutierrez struggles to find the right words, but he does throw out a phrase that seems to best sum it up: mental vomit. The descriptive imagery those words evoke give insight into his process. The characters he paints build off of one another, each one spawning potential for another to emerge, creating a self-contained world of random ideas and voices. At this point in the article, there is another image. It is a skull, an illustration of a skull. At the top of the skull, you see what appears to be brains. And then in the brains appears to be an X. The background of this image, it looks to be like a dusk sky. It's orange in color. And then the background behind this person, illustration of a person with the skull on top of his head, of their head, is blurry images of skulls that sort of look like ghosts. This skull image is rowing in a canoe, and in the water that the canoe is in is another skull, half submerged in the water with a scythe. There's another image. This one is, I'll be honest, very difficult to describe, but I'll do my best. Another skull image. The background looks to be a dark midnight sky. There is, it's a skull with, in one of the eye sockets, an eye that is all yellow. On top of the skull is what looks to be a larva. There looks to be smoke coming out of the top of the skull. And then where the mouth, it would be in the skull, and where the tongue would be, it looks to be a purple slide. On that slide is another larva. And then the question for the first question for the article. First thing you do when you wake up: make coffee and wonder if my brain is going to cooperate with the plans I've laid out for the day. The last thing that you ate: Pop-Tart. There is another image at this point. This one also very challenging to describe. It looks to be a child. Another sort of skull image, but this one has actual skin on the skull. This is an illustration, so it's not a photograph, where the where the child's face would be is an animal of some sort that looks to be sort of like a monkey that is blue. There is another amoeba-looking item coming out of one of the eye sockets. Out of the top of the skull are some green amoeba-looking sort of cell-like images. And then the child is wearing a green and black striped shirt. And in one of his hands, his right hand, or their right hand, is a little pot that's sort of like looks to be like a little magician's pot. Another question in the article. Best advice you've received. It's not up to someone else to get things done. Favorite cartoon character. Sylvester P. Smythe from Cracked Magazine. Now there's another image in the article. This one is an illustration of a skull figure, again, in a boat. Again, at the front of the boat is what appears to be a robot type character that is red with one eye. In the back of the boat is a cactus in a pot, is what it appears to be. On top of the skull is a clownish looking character that has a red and white round bomb on the top of its head. The background for this is multicolored. It looks a little bit like tie-dye with yellow, green, red, and blue. Another image. This is another skull. This skull is only half of the skull, and going through the skull where the brains would be is a slide. And on that slide is some fire that's coming out of the top of the skull. At the back of the skull is a blue ladder. And yeah, that's that one. Another question. How did you get your start as an artist? Can you tell us a little bit about your background? I have been drawing since I was a child. I just felt an urge to recreate the comics and cartoons I saw back then and keep trying to make my own characters. I started doing graffiti when I was a teenager and just was blown away by all the talent and creativity I saw in graph mags and videos. That's when I really found my creative streak, and from there my mind went crazy with characters and ideas. Graffiti was my first real foundation artistically, and it still influences my work to this day. I tried going to art school twice, but never felt it was a good avenue for me. I studied art history on my own, and for years attended a nude figure drawing group and was surrounded by a lot of very talented artists, and inevitably learned a ton from them. Realistic faces were always the hardest thing for me to draw. Maybe that's why I start with a distorted cartoon head when I begin to draw now. Haha. From there, I participated in art shows and kept refining my techniques and started showing my work to more and more people. Instagram has really been useful in getting my work seen. Next in the article is another image. This is a photograph of one of his illustrations that is on a skateboard platform. And the image takes up the full skateboard. And I'm going to go from bottom to top. So at the bottom of this skateboard image, this photo of this skateboard image is another skull, a distorted looking skull that is blue and purple. Coming out of that skull looks to be another child image holding a paintbrush with some yellow paint on it. The child's shirt is blue and orange and black. On top of that is another skull with X's where the eyes would be. And out of that skull is another distorted skull. Coming out of that one is another one of those amoeba-y looking sort of images that looks to be sweating. And then at the top of the skateboard are two of those amoeba looking images. One of them is holding a bat. The other one has a puff of smoke coming out of its eyeball, a purple tongue, and chipped teeth. There is another image. This one looks to be done with sort of a black and white pencil or pen. It is black and white. Again, I'll start at the bottom. It appears to be a child kind of coming out of a hole. It's just a black circle that this child is coming out of. On his t-shirt, or their t-shirt, is a little image of a monster with pointy, look kind of like double horns. And it's another skull image. The child in his left hand is holding kind of what appears to be a club that is connected to an image coming out of the child's skull image with amoebas coming out the side. At the top of this image appears to be another robot sort of image with rocks coming out of the top of that robot's head. Another question from the article. How would you describe your style of art? I always struggle with this question, but what I tell people is a combination of illustrative, cartoon-style characters and creatures emerging from one another, creating a self-contained world of random ideas and voices, a sort of mental vomit, if that makes any sense. What are your artistic tools of choice? My go-to is a Tombow pen and a Tombow brush pen for drawing. I really enjoy using Posca markers and colored pencils, and when painting, Liquitex acrylic paint. Where do your ideas for your next piece come from? Every piece I create is an extension of the last piece I completed. My ideas never really stop. They just continually evolve and transform into the next piece, and on it goes. We have another image. This one is all in color, and it looks like he used those markers that he mentions in the article. The bottom image is a boat, but it looks like a whale. The boat has flippers, and it has a red bottom, and it has eyes. On top of the boat is another skull image. Coming out of the skull is a fish, and that fish appears to be frowning and appears to have some growths coming out of its face. And then the fish has a pot that is secured to him. It's like he's wearing a hat, and coming out of the hat is some strawberries. The next image is also black and white, but it's kind of has a pinkish hue to it. It appears to be 2 or 3 different illustrations of those skull images. They're wearing hats. They have big eyes. There's also what appears to be an owl who is wearing a hat. There appears to be an alien. On both sides of this image are cats holding pitchforks, and there are some bats also flying around. Another question in the article. How do you come up with your crazy characters? It all starts by just sitting down and drawing. I usually start with a face or a skull and build from there. I see every surface, opening, and crevice in the face as potential for some creature or character to emerge from or take up residence. What other types of art do you enjoy doing? I enjoy sculpting with clay, but don't do it very often. How do you spend your time when you're not arting? I spend time with my wife and kids, camping and being outdoors. But let's be honest, even camping, I draw. And when I'm at my kids' Ninja Warrior gym class, I draw there too. We have another image. This one appears to be another child, maybe a teenager, standing in a pool of water that's painted green. They're wearing black pants, a blue tattered t-shirt, a brownish jacket, holding a long knife that has what appears to be blood on it, red in color, wearing a mask that looks to be a hockey mask. Behind that, you see one eye that's closed, one eye that's open that is bloodshot and red. And yeah, that's the image. And they appear to be wearing gloves as well. The next image is black and white. There is a drawing of a robot wearing a helmet. And inside that helmet, you see a skull image. This image, as he has described, one thing being built on top of another, is a skull image. In that skull image's mouth is another skull with an amoeba coming out of it. Everything is coming out of what appears to be, again, water, or sort of looking like a target. And then there is a mask. At the very top of this image looks to be some sort of octopus that is attached to the very top skull. Another question. What would you say is the most important part of your creative process? Being free and loose with my thoughts and tools, letting the shapes and lines determine what I do next, and definitely trying not to overthink what's happening on the paper. What is your favorite part about being an artist? Favorite part of being an artist is the ability to create worlds and characters that the viewer may not be expecting, but just laying down lines and strokes, I can create depth, movement, and surreal images that keep people looking and wanting to buy with their hard-earned money. What's the most challenging part of being an artist? Most challenging part has got to be the social media aspect of it all. Trying to keep up with posting and sharing my work constantly feels more like trying to entertain than just being creative. Although I really do enjoy sharing and connecting with people, it can be exhausting as well. The next image is another boat with flippers. This boat is multicolored in reds and yellow, a little bit of blue. The flippers look to be whale flippers. There are oars for this boat, and in the boat appears to be a beaver, along with a robot coming out of another skull. And the beaver could be running away because it has a knapsack that is red and white and on a stick over his shoulder. The next image, again, black and white. This one is another sort of skull image, big eyes. There, in the mouth of the skull is an elephant holding a coffee cup that says "All Bad Days." At the top of this image is some fire coming out of the top of the skull. And that's the last image in the article. Because I'm nearing the end of this edition of The Rooster, I will read you something from the event calendar. An orchestral rendition of Dr. Dre, 2001, traditional orchestral merged with live hip-hop, Dre not included. May 9th, 2024. No Strings Attached are pleased to present a live orchestral rendition of Dr. Dre, 2001. This body of work features so many intricate musical layers. We have brought in one of Europe's leading orchestras to perform a complete rendition of the album and some of Dre's West Coast classics from start to finish, accompanied by DJs, singers, and lyricists. This is not your average orchestral event. This is no ordinary orchestral event. Expect a full standing crowd with performances from various DJs, lyricists, and singers, as well as a full orchestral rendition of Dr. Dre's 2001 album, followed by other of Dre's West Coast classics. Note, Dr. Dre will not be attending this event. This is an orchestral rendition event performing covers and renditions. This is a standing event. Thanks for listening to this edition of The Rooster. My name is Dawn.
If you enjoyed this program, please register for our free services at www.aftersight.org or by calling 303-786-7777.